men on the news. David is the award-winning journalist. He is the vice president and managing editor of WND and editor of Whistleblower magazine. David's been on our program many times before. How you doing, David?
I'm doing very well, Tim and Ray. I'm glad to be on your show again.
What kind of shopper are you, David? Not at all?
I leave that to others, but I have to tell you, the Amazon drone thing, it's never going to happen. I'll tell you why. It's going to collide with another phenomenon, which is known as over 100 million guns in the hands of independent-minded Americans that don't like weird things flying right over their house.
So you're going to have...
I remember when everybody was upset about the drones last year, there was a certain period of time when it was dominated the news cycle, and Charles Krauthammer came on Fox and said, you know, you're going to see people exercising their Second Amendment rights when they got some kind of a police drone or something that's hovering over their house, taking pictures. And they do have them armed, by the way. There are armed drones in this country that some police departments are trying to get a hold of. And that's just not going to go over real well out here in the heartland. And so while you're packaged with your new pair of Levi's, even if it's like 3 for the price of 1, are floating overhead over your house, maybe they're going to your neighbor 3 or 4 blocks away, but if it's floating over your house, somebody is going to say, you know, let's practice our what do they do? Trap shooting or
it's
shooting.
it would be
just shoot it down.
Drone season. Huh? You're going to have good old boys looking
It's
for...
going to happen because there are people that are a lot less self-controlled than you and me and your audience. They're going to say, what? Really? I'm getting some target practice here.
Yeah. I think the Amazon drone thing's not ever going to happen. I think that's fun to talk about. But the drone used by law enforcement now, that's you're saying that's a reality or possibly a reality in our country?
You can go to Verizon and buy a drone. They're on the shelf there for $300.
What does it do?
It just hovers overhead. It works off, I think, like a Bluetooth signal, so it only works fairly close to your cell phone. You control it with your cell phone.
So it's like a model
look
plane.
At them online. Little propellers. They're really freaky little things. People, roofers, painters, people use them. There are uses for them. Take aerial photographs of certain things. They're not inherently evil. They're only when they have like 10,000 of them that are in the hands of a overreaching, increasingly tyrannical police state type of government. Those are the fears that people have of having the George Jetson thing. Remember, there was no crime when the Jetsons. I mean, there was like everything was just
no. You had a lot of space junk up there with the Jetsons, though, if you remember.
Yeah, you had to watch where you're going.
It was a wonder there weren't more crashes during that show.
Right.
I want to ask you this on a serious note. Rand Paul, the senator from Kentucky, you know, he went on the Senate floor and talked about this was it a filibuster he had or something? Remember that about 6 months ago about you know, trying to get the American our federal government to commit that they would not use drones inside the U.S.
Yeah, and that was tied in with the fact that we have been killing people overseas, and this is controversial because we kill terrorists, including Anwar al-Awlaki, who was he was a top recruiter for Al-Qaeda, and he was the inspiration to the Fort Hood shooter. You know, some of them were genuinely bad people. We also killed his 16-year-old son, an American citizen, as he was sitting in a restaurant with a drone. I have not really heard the explanation for that one yet. So it's controversial. It's not all black or all white, but there is a controversy over our using drones to go and take out people overseas. And people said, all right, overseas is one thing. We don't want this stuff in our country. And especially, we don't want them in the hands of a government. You know, we just heard, this is the same year where we've heard about NSA surveillance.
Right.
We have police departments that are, through various federal legislation, inheriting all kinds of tanks and really absolute battlefield equipment. If you know about this, there's a transformation afoot. of the police in America. Their tactics and their equipment is really getting to be no different from what's used in the battlefield. And traditionally, there's been a big divide. We don't use the military against U.S. citizens. We don't use them in U.S. soil. We use the National Guard during Katrina and things like that. But basically, there's a big divide between military stuff and police powers. Police are there to protect and serve. It's a different mentality as soldiers at war. Those lines are being seriously blurred, and so the whole drone controversy fits right into that. We don't want our country to look like a battlefield or a third world country where there's people with military rifles in every corner. We don't want that in America.
We're talking to David Kupelian. David is, if you go to WorldNet Daily or what's known today as WND.com, you can read David's work, and also he is the editor of Whistleblower magazine. Is that the website you want people to go to, David?
Yes, WND.com, and they can, if they are interested in Whistleblower, at the top right, there's a whole thing they can click and they can read all about it there.
Whistleblower magazine is got a magazine in your hands, paper magazine, the old-fashioned kind of magazine, and it's an excellent. They do an excellent job. David does and his team putting these magazines together. David, you wrote a column. Wanted to talk to you about a story, I guess it was, by you about a title. Here's the title of it: Why Our Cities Are Self-Destructing. Why Our Cities Are Self-Destructing. I found this article very interesting, and I wanted to talk to you about it. So why don't you go ahead and tell people what you're saying here?
Well, first let me say we actually published this one online subsequently, so they want to read it online. If they just Google my name and the word cities, they'll probably go right to it. It's got a different title online. It's Why Our Cities Are Writhing in the Death Grip of Crime and Bankruptcy. But that's too long to remember. Just put my name, or you could post it on your website, actually, if you want. But it's online if they want to read it. It's a very interesting thing. This is a slight stretch, but not much, to say that generally speaking, with few exceptions, the cities in America are liberal, and the countryside, everything outside the cities is conservative. And all you have to do, don't take my word for it, go look at we've all seen the red state, blue state maps. Look at the red county, blue county maps. Same idea, but it goes county by county. Like I live in Oregon, there are 36 counties. And it shows you the whole, Oregon always goes for a Democrat. It's a reliable blue state. But if you look at a county by county map of the state, the whole state is a sea of red and a little bit of blue up there in the I-5 corridor where all the big cities are. The whole country is like that. It is a total wash. America is a giant red meaning, conservative, traditional American values, center-right, as they say. That's red. And there's little pucks of blue here and there. New England is kind of all blue, except for a little spot in Maine. But just Miami down there, southern Texas, just on the Pacific seaboard in California. But it's, I'm going to say, 90+% red state. And yet we voted for Barack Obama the last two elections, and the Senate is in the hands of Democrats. And basically the country is going 300 miles an hour in a blue direction. So it's important to take note of what is going on with with our cities. Even in Texas, red state Texas, the major cities, the four biggest cities, all went for Obama in the last election. So even within a state, a traditionally red state, the cities are reliably and getting more so blue.
David, Ray Pritchard here. I am looking at the article right now, and there is a fascinating sentence in here I'd like you to expound upon, because there's a new thought to me. Quote, people don't make cities liberal, cities make people liberal. What does that mean?
I quoted that from a great article in the Atlantic, which I quote in depth in there. which was called Red State, Blue City. And he makes that point. And then I pick up the point, and I use myself as the example because I grew up in a very blue area. I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is one of the wealthiest and most liberal, progressive enclaves just outside Washington, D.C., in the country. This is a place that has led the charge on these transgender bathroom laws where, you want to let, men go into girls' bathrooms because they kind of feel like they're more comfortable think of themselves as female. This is crazy stuff. A generation ago, you'd be locked up for trying to implement something like that. And now this is the law, and places like Montgomery County. And so I made the point about growing up there, and I obviously survived. I didn't become a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, but there is something about that environment, and I spent a lot of time there in the last 2 years because my mother died, and I had to help settle her estate, and I spent many months there. And I tell you, there is something, I don't want to sound weird saying in the air, but there's a cultural osmosis factor. Let's put it this way. We are all we're all influenced. We're all suggestible to the way other people are. And if you grow up in an area where virtually everybody is a kind of a happy, self-confident, at least on the surface, very, very nice liberal person, and any ideas that are conservative, people, personalities, policies that are conservative you don't even know anybody like that, and if one of them comes up, like a Rush Limbaugh, they are immediately mocked and the face goes wrinkly. If you were a child growing up in that environment, you would tend to reflect your environment and become a liberal. We talk about this at colleges. Young, idealistic, impressionable, smart kids, they go away to college and they turn into liberals because that is the environment. And you have to be very well grounded in your own belief system and your what you see as reality to withstand that. Well, it's the same principle in the cultural environment of the city. So I've noticed it myself. Others have noticed it. There's something about that environment that tends to turn you, if you're not really well grounded in a Judeo-Christian, it's not even Judeo-Christian, it's reality. Things are not true because the Bible says so. The Bible says so because it's true. It was true first. There was no Bible back when Adam and Eve and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all these guys were around. There was no Bible. But there were still good and evil. There was right and wrong, and that later became written and codified into the Bible. There's a reality level that if we don't really hold strong to, we are influenced by a very powerful surrounding, and a city is a very, very powerful environment.
Talking to David Kupelian, what about we all hear the horror stories of what's happened in Detroit, and that it's basically rotting from the inside to. But and that's one of America's great cities, historically. How bad is it, and is that likely to happen in other major cities?
It's literally self-destructing right before our eyes. I spent 5 years there. I went to school in Ann Arbor, Michigan, University of Michigan. Detroit is a great city, motor city. It's the seat of our number one industry historically, the automobiles. But it is, you can go through all the statistics. The amount of unpayable municipal debt, the drop in home prices, the vanishing tax base, all the problems with it. The fact that when I wrote this, 40% of the seats of the street lights in the city were not working. In fact, it's commonly said that people do not call 911 when there's an emergency because more often than not, no one responds. So this is beyond your kind of hectic, problem-ridden, dysfunctional city. This is really one that is actually falling apart like a third-world country. But once you get past all that, you see this is very sad, a huge out-migration. There's no tax base. You say you pretty soon have to get to the question of why, okay? Well, the why is because who has been running Detroit for all this time? For 20 years, the mayor of Detroit was Coleman Young. Coleman Young, it was not widely known, was a communist. I'm not saying this is some like right-wing guy on the radio saying he's a communist. I'm saying he was a card-carrying member of the Communist Party USA, a real live communist. A communist is somebody who hates everything America stands for. America's cities were once shining places of the marketplace, of trade, of innovation. They don't necessarily have to be horrible places that are falling apart like Detroit. It's not a foregone conclusion. But when you put people that are absolutely, opposed to and dedicated as a communist, the communists during the time he was a communist were people that were actively sworn to uphold the Soviet Union. These were not just, well, I kind of believe in Marxism. Communist Party USA actually was tied in with the Soviet Union. This is a foreign enemy power. You put somebody like that in charge of a great city, it's going to start to rot.
But you said he was a mayor for 20 years?
Almost 20 years.
So the citizens of Detroit brought this upon themselves.
Well, they did. I don't think they necessarily knew that he was a card-carrying communist. This is not something that people necessarily knew. Most communists, like David Horowitz, who you all know, whose parents were both communists, he says, look, none of the communists in this country, he was a red diaper baby, and there were many others, none of them called themselves communists. They called themselves progressives. Golly, where have I heard that term? That's kind of what the left calls themselves today. But whatever name you want to put to it, these are people that hate capitalism, hate the free market system of success and failure that we have, that like it or not, made America great, the most powerful economy in the world and world history. They hate that. They think it's bad, it's unfair, whatever they think. They hate it, and they're going to undermine it. So when you put somebody like that in charge, and the unions go and rape the city with all of their exorbitant demands and you basically put people that are going to plunder the city and put things and policies in place that cannot work. It's not going to be long before the natural wealth and inheritance of the city is gone, and all the productive people move out, and you're left with basically an urban underclass that's just predatory. You're either being preyed on, or you're the predator.